Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
The black car stops at the north gate of Sandringham at 6:14 in the morning. No flashbulbs, no reporters, just the sound of tires on cold gravel and the low click of a door opening before the engine has fully died. A single figure steps out, coat buttoned high, and walks toward the house without looking back. Inside, in a study most of Britain will never see, a folder already sits open on a desk. 5 lines on a printed page, and next to each line, a small handwritten mark. This is where the story begins. Not with a speech, not with a statement, with a pen moving quietly across paper while the rest of the country sleeps. According to reports circulating in the British press, something shifted at Sandringham during a private royal stay this winter, something that left no official trace, no press release, and no public explanation. Royal commentary analysts describe it only as a quiet administrative review, but the word that keeps surfacing in those reports is harder to ignore. Removal. 5 names reportedly tied to the Parker Bowles family allegedly traced off an internal reference list while King Charles III was in residence. Hi viewers, before we go any further, tell me in the comments, have you ever been quietly cut out of something and only found out long after it happened? Drop a yes or no below. I read every single one. Now stay with me, because what makes this moment strange is the timing. King Charles III has built a reputation over decades for a certain style of leadership. Slow, measured, procedural. People close to royal circles have long described him as a man who governs through structure rather than noise. He does not slam doors, he reorganizes the rooms behind them. And Queen Camilla, his wife, the woman who took the title of Queen Consort after one of the most watched personal journeys in modern royal history, has occupied a position that most observers believed was finally permanently settled. That belief is now being tested. The Parker Bowles name carries weight in this story for one reason. Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes, Camilla's children from her first marriage, have existed for years on the visible edges of royal life. Present at events, photographed at distance. Family, but never quite institution. And it is precisely that edge, that thin line between blood and structure, that reports now suggest is being redrawn. The palace has said nothing. That silence in royal terms is rarely empty. What unsettles the people watching most closely is not the idea of a list. Every great institution keeps records of who stands near its center. What unsettles them is the choice of moment. Why would a symbolic adjustment to family proximity happen in private, during a retreat, with no announcement and no acknowledgement at all? Because in the monarchy, the things that matter least are announced loudly, and the things that matter most are simply done. So the question hangs over Sandringham like the morning cold itself. If 5 names were truly traced off that page, the real story is not what was removed. It is what that removal was meant to protect. The folder closes, a private secretary carries it from the room without a word, and within hours, internal communication across 2 royal households reportedly goes quiet in a way that those who track these things describe as unusual. That detail matters more than it sounds. To understand why, you have to understand something the public almost never sees. The royal family does not run on the titles printed in newspapers. It runs on internal reference structures, layered records that determine who gets invited, who sits where, whose name appears on which schedule, and who is granted what the institution calls proximity. These lists are not ceremonial decoration. They are the operating system of the monarchy itself, and most of them never appear in public. There is the public record, the version Britain reads in the morning papers. Then there is something else entirely, the working architecture of association, the maps of closeness that decide how near a person stands to the center of power. According to reports circulating among royal commentators, it is one of these private structures, not any public title, that was reportedly adjusted during the Sandringham stay. 5 Parker Bowles linked references, allegedly revised or removed, No statement explained it, no official confirmed it, but experts who study how royal households actually function point out that this is exactly how meaningful change moves inside the institution, not through declarations, but through quiet edits to documents the public is never shown. Here is the part that keeps people awake. Why would internal proximity matter more than public titles? Because titles are permanent, and proximity is not. A name in the line of succession cannot be erased with a pen, but access, the right to stand close, to be counted among the inner circle, to appear on the lists that shape a royal life, that can shift in a single morning, and a person can keep every public honor they hold while quietly losing the thing that gave those honors meaning. Queen Camilla's own position, observers are careful to note, appears unchanged in public. Her role as queen consort remains stable, visible, secure. The reported adjustment touches the names around her, not her own. And that distinction is the whole tension of this story. Prince William, the Prince of Wales, enters here only as a shape on the horizon. Reports do not place him at the center of any of this. But royal analysts have long described him as the future stabilizer of the institution, the figure whose eventual reign casts its logic backward over decisions made today. When the monarchy reorganizes itself, it rarely does so for the present. It does so for the version of itself that is coming. So a single administrative change, made quietly, reportedly set off a stillness across the households that several commentators found difficult to explain. The pen had moved, the folder had closed, and somewhere in the gap between what was written and what was said, a much older royal instinct had reportedly awakened, one that asks a single cold question of everyone near the throne. Are you family, or are you simply close? A photograph from 2005 still circulates online. Camilla, in pale blue, standing beside the then Prince Charles on their wedding day, smiling into a future that half the country doubted she would ever be allowed to have. 20 years later, she is queen. That arc, from one of the most criticized figures in modern royal history to the crowned consort standing beside the king, is one of the great, slow transformations of the British monarchy. And it did not happen by accident. It happened through exactly the kind of patient, structural work that defines King Charles III's entire approach to power. For decades, Camilla was the name the institution kept at a distance. Reports through the 1990s painted her as the obstacle, the third presence in a marriage the whole world was watching collapse. Public perception was brutal and, for years, immovable, and yet the institution did what it always does. It waited. It absorbed. It reframed her presence slowly, event by event, year by year, until the woman once kept far from the center became the woman crowned beside the king at Westminster Abbey. That is the proof of something important. In the monarchy, acceptance is not a feeling, it is a process. It is built, maintained, and, when necessary, revised, which is what makes the current reports so striking. Set against Camilla's journey, you have Catherine, the Princess of Wales, the modern face of royal stability, the figure whose public image carries an enormous share of the monarchy's goodwill. And standing behind both of them, you have Anne, the Princess Royal, the quiet institutional backbone, the royal who has spent a lifetime understanding that duty and visibility are not the same thing. 3 women, 3 different relationships to the machinery of the crown. And here is the contrast that royal observers keep returning to. Camilla's own acceptance is secure, but the acceptance of those around her, the extended family, the Parker Bowles names on the edges, may operate under entirely different rules, because public acceptance and internal calibration are not the same currency. A person can be loved by the public and still be quietly adjusted within the institution. A family can be photographed, welcomed, smiled upon at weddings and christenings, and still find its formal proximity recalibrated behind closed doors. The smile is real, the closeness is managed, and the people watching most carefully have begun to notice that what is shifting may not be relationships at all. It is distance.
Camilla is going to make a whole chapter. She knew that she was disqualified from becoming Princess of Wales on 3 counts. One, that her looks weren't up to it. Secondly, that her aristocratic lineage wasn't up to it.
Distance, in royal terms, is not coldness. It is engineering. It is the careful measurement of how near a person stands to the throne, recalculated whenever the institution decides its future requires a different shape. And according to commentary now circulating, that measurement is reportedly being redrawn around the very names Camilla brought with her into royal life, which raises a question no one inside the palace has answered. If even a queen's own family can be quietly remeasured, then what does belonging inside the monarchy actually mean? And who decides when it ends? It is not the first time Sandringham has appeared at the center of a royal turning point. The estate sits in the flat Norfolk countryside, private, gated, far from the cameras of London, and across the documented history of the monarchy, it has served a specific function. It is where the family goes to decide things, quietly, away from the public eye. The place where private conversations have repeatedly preceded changes the country only understood much later. That pattern is what gives the current reports their weight. Royal historians have long noted that some of the institution's most significant moments did not begin with announcements. They began behind closed doors at private estates, where a small number of people reached decisions that the public machinery would only later be asked to carry out. Sandringham, again and again, appears in these accounts, not as a holiday home, but as a site of governance. So, when reports describe a private Sandringham stay, followed by a quiet internal review, the people who study the monarchy do not hear coincidence. They hear rhythm. The same rhythm that has played out across reigns. A retreat, a conversation, a decision, and then, only afterward, the slow, visible consequences. King Charles III's governing style fits this pattern almost perfectly. He is not a man of dramatic gestures. Those close to royal circles describe a leader who prefers process to performance, who reshapes the institution through procedure rather than proclamation. For a man like that, a private estate is not an escape from the work. It is where the most important work quietly gets done. And here is where the public's imagination does the rest. When the palace stays silent, speculation rushes to fill the space. Royal commentators begin connecting dots. A private stay, a reported list, 5 names. The absence of any explanation becomes itself a kind of evidence, not of wrongdoing, but of intention. Because in the monarchy, observers have learned that silence often surrounds the decisions that matter most. This is why the story is being reframed even as it spreads. Reports increasingly describe what allegedly happened not as removal, but as recalibration. Not names erased in anger, but proximity boundaries quietly redrawn for reasons the institution has chosen not to share. It is a softer word, but softer words in royal history have often described harder realities. The pattern holds: a private stay at Sandringham, a non-public review reportedly beginning shortly after, the same sequence that has marked royal turning points before, repeating now around the Parker Bowles name. And the people watching are left with a question that history itself seems to be asking on their behalf. Why does Sandringham keep appearing at the exact moment the monarchy decides to quietly become something new? A food writer walks into a London restaurant and is photographed at the door. An art curator opens a private viewing across town. Neither event makes the front pages, neither is meant to. But both names, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes, sit at the center of the question this entire story keeps circling. Tom Parker Bowles has built a public identity entirely his own, a respected food writer, a familiar cultural presence, a man known to the British public for his work rather than his bloodline. Laura Lopes has lived a quieter life, connected to the art world, largely private, rarely seeking the spotlight. They are Queen Camilla's children. They are, by any ordinary definition, family. But the monarchy does not run on ordinary definitions, and that is the tension at the heart of the Parker Bowles question. There are no official changes here, no statements, no confirmed removals, no public alteration to anyone's standing. There is only reported commentary, circulating discussion among royal analysts, about internal reference lists and the names allegedly adjusted within them. Everything in this part of the story lives in that careful space between what is known and what is suggested. What is not in doubt is the monarchy's sensitivity to one specific thing: optics. The institution has always understood that the visibility of extended family carries risk. Every person who stands near the crown becomes, in the public eye, a representative of it. And the further a name sits from the direct line, the more carefully the institution tends to manage how, and how often, that name appears. Here the contrast sharpens. Queen Camilla's role is institutional. It is fixed, formal, bound into the structure of the crown itself. Her children's connection is something else. It is familial, personal, real, but not institutional in the same way. And the question royal commentators keep raising is exactly where one ends and the other begins. Where does family stop and institutional association start? It is not a cruel question. It is a structural one. The monarchy has always had to decide which relationships it formally recognizes and which it simply allows to exist nearby. A mother can be queen. Her children can still be, in the institution's quiet internal language, adjacent rather than central. And reports now suggest that this very categorization, how extended relatives are placed within private structures, may be what shifted at Sandringham, which brings us to the number that refuses to go away: 5. 5 names. It appears again and again in the commentary, repeated with a consistency that observers find striking. Not 3, not 7, 5. And in a story built on silence and speculation, a number that specific tends to make people lean in rather than look away. Because a vague rumor fades. But a precise one, 5 names, 1 family, 1 quiet stay, has the shape of something real. A map of royal responsibilities is being quietly rewritten, and the pen belongs to a younger hand. Across the last few years, Prince William, the Prince of Wales, has taken on more of the institution's operational weight than at any point in his life. Patronages, strategic priorities, the slow transfer of duties that signals one reign preparing to give way to the next. And royal commentators have noticed something in the way he works. He moves toward clarity. He trims overlap. He reportedly favors a leaner, sharper version of the monarchy than the one he stands to inherit. That instinct matters enormously to this story, because the modernization of the monarchy, the project William is widely understood to represent, has always carried a particular shape. It looks, in its early stages, like subtraction. Fewer working royals, tighter circles, a reduction of the sprawling network of names that once gathered around the crown. Efficiency, in royal terms, often means deciding who no longer needs to be quite so close.
Eating with her, there was these beautiful takeouts, but he also recounted what it was like for that family, the Parker Bowles family, at the height of the relationship, the scandalous.
From a public relations standpoint, analysts suggest this is exactly the lens through which the Sandringham report should be read, not as a personal dispute, not as family tension spilling into the open, but as the quiet machinery of generational change, doing what it always does, recalculating who belongs at the center as power slowly shifts from one reign toward the next. King Charles III represents the refinement phase, the careful, procedural reshaping of the institution he waited a lifetime to lead. William represents the phase that comes after, the modernization, the streamlining. And the two phases, royal observers point out, tend to reinforce each other. What Charles adjusts quietly now, William inherits cleanly later. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, anchors the public side of that transition, her stability, her widespread popularity, the steadiness of her image. All of it provides the calm surface beneath which structural change can move without alarming the public. While attention rests on her visible role, the less visible work of reorganization reportedly continues out of sight. And that is the unsettling logic of modernization. It rarely announces itself as change. It arrives first as removal, a name dropped from a list, a relative quietly recategorized, a small administrative edit that means nothing on its own, until enough of them accumulate into a monarchy that simply looks different than it did before. Subtraction first, transformation later. which is why the reported timing keeps drawing attention. Modernization cycles, commentators note, have a strange habit of aligning with private royal retreats, those quiet stretches away from cameras when the institution does its hardest thinking. So the question sharpens once more. If the future of the monarchy is already being drafted in private by hands preparing for a reign still to come, then whose names get written into that future and whose are quietly being left out of it? The phone calls do not come. The statement is never drafted. The press office, asked again and again, says nothing at all. And that silence becomes the loudest thing in the entire story. For most institutions, silence is simply an absence, a gap waiting to be filled. Inside the monarchy, royal observers have learned to read it differently. Here, silence is not empty. It is a choice, a carefully maintained position. And when Buckingham Palace declines to confirm, deny, or explain, those who study the institution understand that the absence of words is itself a kind of message. That is what makes the current quiet so striking to the people watching. According to reports circulating in the British press, no official acknowledgement of any list, any review, or any adjustment has ever been offered. The palace has not confirmed the 5 names. It has not denied them either. And in royal interpretation culture, that combination, neither yes nor no, tends to generate far more speculation than any statement ever could. To understand why, you have to understand the people who manage that silence, the courtiers, the private secretaries, the senior staff who operate as the institution's filters, deciding what reaches the public and what stays sealed behind palace walls. These are the figures who shape how the monarchy is understood, often by controlling precisely what is never said, and reports suggest it is within their world, the procedural machinery, not the public stage, that the most consequential decisions quietly take form. Here is the contrast that defines this chapter. On the surface, the monarchy's public messaging continues exactly as before. Engagements proceed, photographs are released, the visible rhythm of royal life rolls on without interruption. But beneath that steady surface, reports describe internal procedural changes moving on an entirely separate track, unseen, unannounced, and unexplained. The 2 layers do not always match, and the gap between them is where this entire story lives. Royal analysts are careful to stay neutral here. No one is accusing anyone of anything. There is no wrongdoing alleged, no scandal claimed as fact. There is only the observation of a pattern, a private stay, a reported review, a silence that has stretched longer than usual around the names in question. The institution is doing what it has always done. The watchers are simply noticing. But silence, when it surrounds a specific set of names for long enough, begins to take on a shape of its own. It stops feeling like discretion and starts feeling like a decision already made. Because in the monarchy, observers note, some decisions are never announced. They are simply allowed to become true. And so the most unsettling possibility of all begins to surface. What if a pathway has reportedly already closed, a door quietly shut on 5 names, without a single public word ever marking the moment it happened? A name disappears from a guest list, and no one says why. That is how it works in the monarchy. Not with a confrontation, not with an explanation, just an absence where a presence used to be, noticed first by the people closest to it, and only much later by everyone else. Step back far enough, and the history of the British monarchy reveals itself as a long record of presence and absence, who was invited, who was not, who stood in the photograph, and who was quietly moved out of frame. The institution has always evolved less through what it adds than through what it allows to fade. And removal, in royal terms, has rarely meant anger. More often, it has meant administrative recalibration, the cold, procedural redrawing of who belongs where. Royal biographers have long debated whether the public ever truly understands these moments as they happen. The clearest historical reference point remains the institution's handling of public perception around Diana, Princess of Wales, a chapter that taught the monarchy, painfully, how sensitive the management of family visibility can be and how lasting the consequences of getting it wrong. That memory, observers suggest, still shapes how carefully the institution manages the people on its edges today. Set against that institutional memory, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stands as the modern counterweight. Her visibility is steady, deliberate, reassuring, the kind of presence that signals continuity to a watching public. And it is precisely that contrast that makes the reported recalibration around other names feel so pointed. Some figures are drawn closer to the center. Others, reportedly, are measured a little further from it. The tone of this part of the story is not dramatic. It is reflective. Because what is being described is not a feud. It is a process as old as the crown itself. The quiet, continuous adjustment of who stands near power and who is gently allowed to drift toward its margins. And here is the hard truth the watchers keep returning to. Absence is often more permanent than announcement. A statement can be corrected, a title can be restored, but a name simply left off a list, year after year, with no explanation and no acknowledgement, becomes something far more difficult to reverse. It becomes the new normal. The institution moves on. The public forgets there was ever a question, and the absence hardens quietly into structure. Which leads to the thought that gives this entire story its weight. In the monarchy, what remains after an adjustment often matters more than what was removed. The 5 names are only the surface. The real question is what their reported absence is meant to reshape, and what the institution is quietly building in the space they leave behind. Stop. Before this goes any further, one thing has to be said clearly. Nothing here has been confirmed. For all the weight of the reports, all the patterns and the silence and the repeated number 5, the honest center of this story is simple. There are no confirmed removals. There is no official document the public has seen. There is only circulating commentary, speculation among royal analysts, and the interpretation of a silence that the palace has chosen not to break. That distinction matters more than anything else in this entire account. Because the monarchy operates on a principle of confidentiality that is older than any of the people currently inside it. Internal structures stay internal, private decisions stay private. And that means much of what is discussed in commentary circles, including the reports at the heart of this story, exists in a space the institution will never formally address. Not because something is being hidden, necessarily, but because discretion is simply how the crown has always functioned. So it is worth separating the layers clearly. There is the public record, the confirmed, documented reality of titles and roles and official events. There is commentary, the analysis offered by royal observers attempting to read meaning into what they see. And there is speculation, the reported rumors, the alleged lists, the unconfirmed claims that travel quickly precisely because they cannot be checked. This story has touched all 3. And it would be a failure of honesty to pretend otherwise. The reflection that closes this layer is a quiet one. Perception in royal matters almost always travels faster than fact. A whisper of 5 names moves through the world long before anyone can prove a single one was ever written down. And in that gap, between what is felt to be true and what is known to be true, most royal stories actually live. So the calm, grounded truth is this. The monarchy keeps its own counsel. The reports remain reports. And understanding this story means holding both things at once, the fascination of the pattern and the honesty that no one outside the palace walls can yet say for certain what, if anything, occurred. Somewhere inside a royal household tonight, a new list is being written. Not the one from the reports, not the 5 names. A different list, the next one. Because that is the one truth this entire story rests on. The monarchy is always, quietly, drafting the next version of itself. It never stops. Every reign refines what came before. Every generation redraws the boundaries it inherited. The institution that crowned Queen Camilla is not the same one that once kept her at a distance. And the institution Prince William will one day lead will not be the same one King Charles III governs now. Change is not an event in the monarchy. It is the permanent condition. So the figures in this story each represent a phase. William, the Prince of Wales, and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stand for the continuity that is coming, the steady hands preparing to carry the crown forward, King Charles III represents refinement, the careful reshaping of an institution he waited a lifetime to lead. And Queen Camilla represents something remarkable in its own right. A stabilized role, hard-won, secured against decades of doubt. The 5 names, whatever their truth, are simply part of a much larger and older pattern. Lists, titles, and proximity are never fixed in the monarchy. They are written, revised, and rewritten again and again by hands that rarely explain themselves. The monarchy does not announce change first, it organizes it. And only later does the world notice. That is where this story leaves us. Not with an accusation, but with a question about how power quietly reshapes itself, and who gets to decide where the lines are drawn. If this kind of forensic look inside the hidden machinery of the royal institution is what you came for, then stay close. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story, the next pattern, the next quiet decision, the next thread we pull. And before you go, tell me in the comments, do you believe the institution protects its people or simply protects itself? Share your thoughts, because the best discussions here are built by viewers like you, and your perspective might be the one that makes someone else see the whole story differently. The next list is already being written. The only question is whose name is on it.